the 3 things you know about Australia's First Nations people? Sadly, not everyone can answer this question in full. So, when it comes to Indigenous learnings, how can educational institutions do more to help? Ticker Ed starts right now.
Ticker Ed, in association with Enquiry Tracker, empowering schools to manage and grow inquiries and online enrolments.
Hello and welcome back to Ticker Ed, where we will be unpacking and examining the way we teach, listen and learn from primary education right through to university and beyond. And whilst Enquiry Tracker is the presenting sponsor of today's program, all of the opinions and views expressed in the following segment are of course our own. Joining me now is my regular co-host and co-founder of Enquiry Tracker, Greg Campitelli, with today's topic, which is a very important one, I am happy to say, is gaining traction around the world, the incorporation of Indigenous knowledges in education. Greg, thanks for joining me.
Absolute pleasure. It's a deeply personal one for me, this one, Mike, because I'd really like to start first of all by acknowledgement of country.
Please.
And I think it's very relevant that we'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are coming to you from, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And we pay our respects to their elders, past and present.
Well said. Greg, I noticed in the intro there that we were talking about knowledges, plural. Talk to me about that and why it's not just knowledge across the board.
Well, firstly, let's talk about the peoples. I think we've got to start with that. So firstly, there are more than 370 million Indigenous people across 70 countries worldwide. And Indigenous peoples are often known as First Peoples or First Nations or Native peoples. And they are populations who inhabited their country or a region when people of different cultures arrived and which became dominant through invasion, conquest, occupation, or settlement. So I think that's important before we start speaking about the knowledge question.
Well, let's talk about those knowledges then. And I guess I understand there's a wide range of Indigenous peoples and, you know, languages and all this sort of thing.
Absolutely. And then this Indigenous knowledges goes way beyond what most people think. So firstly, and this is not an exhaustive list, but it includes living in harmony with the environment. There's medicinal knowledge, such as native plant derivatives, for example. Obviously cooking and food gathering, of course. But we can think about land and geographic knowledge incorporated in oral histories. We often like to think about complex social networks, respect systems, for example, religious and belief systems, and of course, Indigenous artworks. All make up this broad group of Indigenous knowledges.
And I think when I think back to my education surrounding Indigenous knowledges, art was probably the biggest one that we were taken through as children. But of course, you've listed an exhaustive list there of benefits.
Absolutely. But it's important to know that there are some great initiatives occurring in schools, Mike, but gosh, there's a long way to go. It's important that these initiatives that are occurring in education actually acknowledge past injustices. It's very important to incorporate an awareness and respect of the strength, validity and integrity of displaced knowledge systems. So it's vital to acknowledge this framework of understanding. I often think about my own generation, for example, involved in learning about Indigenous Australia only from the point where it intersected with European settlement. And there was very little, of course, given to any Indigenous histories or knowledges prior to the white settlement. So for us, it's a similar story, I'm sure, in North America, in South America,
Canada.
Where there's been collision between, ancient Indigenous cultures, and it is a collision, and modern technologically driven ones, where there's been no real value or celebration given to Indigenous knowledges.
And you like to think that's changing, obviously, which is great as well, which is very exciting.
It's slow, but it's positive. There are positive steps happening. I think in New Zealand, for example, there's some extraordinary initiatives being undertaken with Maori cultures and bringing it into the curriculum more as standard, not something special, something that we should be doing. But for me, it's important, and the reason why it's important is to give increased respect to and understanding of other cultures, not just the dominant one. To think more broadly about social and environmental issues through a different land relationship lens. And finally, again, one of acknowledgement and redress, as well as education, an understanding of Indigenous histories and what this knowledge can offer all of us.
100%.
Perfect opportunity to bring in our guest.
And let's welcome Professor Jacqueline Troy, Director, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Research and Professor in the Department of Linguistics, University of Sydney, and a proud Ngarigu woman from the Snowy Mountains. Welcome to you, Jacqueline.
Hi, thanks for having me on the program.
No, thank you for joining us. Now, first up, talk to us a little bit about your work within the university space.
So my, I guess, main role at Sydney University is to support the development of Indigenous researchers from Australia and overseas, but also to support all aspects of Indigenous research across all disciplines. So it's a rather huge job, but the I think within the sector we're doing very well overall now. We're starting to see more and more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander researchers coming through our universities and focusing on research across many, many, many disciplines.
Jacqueline, I just wanted to ask you about your particular area of expertise, which is language. Can you talk us specifically about what's happening in this area in terms of education and the adoption of Indigenous languages in Australia and globally into the curriculum?
Well, Australia is actually doing very well internationally. We now have in the Australian curriculum, put together by the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, ACARA, within the languages curriculum, we have what's called the Framework for Teaching Aboriginal Languages and Torres Strait Islander Languages. So any school in Australia can actually teach one or more of our own Australian languages. These are the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages. And I was very fortunate to have a lead on that when that curriculum was being developed. And the framework sets out against the broader curriculum guidelines for languages and against the ambition for the whole of the Australian curriculum, what teachers and schools can do to teach one of our languages. So, and then within each jurisdiction across Australia, we have individual localised curriculum and syllabus developed by schools and by systems. So one way or another, any school in Australia can teach an Aboriginal language or a Torres Strait Islander language.
It's fantastic to hear. It certainly wasn't something that was available when I was going through the school system, unfortunately. But what are some of the things, some of the Indigenous Knowledges initiatives, I suppose, we're seeing in schools beyond sort of what you've touched on there as well?
Well, there's no doubt that having our languages as part of the school system now is bringing Indigenous knowledges much more squarely into teaching. I mean, there's nothing quite like learning a language to understand a people. If you can speak the language of a group of people, then you have an insight into how those people think, you have an insight into their cultural world, their history, and the environment that they live in. You know, language is where we encode all this information as humans. So language learning in itself actually brings Indigenous knowledges into our school systems. But of course, across many other areas of the curriculum, we've now got Indigenous science knowledges being taught, an understanding of the environment, everything from mathematics to astronomy, an understanding of histories. You know, at last we're having what I would call truth-telling in our history in Australia. It's no longer the case that we have to completely avoid the word invasion. The British invaded Australia in 1788. You know?
It's so
that's
inspiring.
Our knowledge. We know this. Yeah.
It's so inspiring to hear those words that we're on the right track. We haven't reached the destination, but we're on the right track. It's a maturity, and you're so right, Jacqueline. When we talk about the immersion in language, you immerse in culture, and you suddenly are greater for the study, really. But what do schools and educators need to keep in mind in this space? What are the green and red lights that people need to watch out for to do it right? Yeah. And they're not, you know, we don't want to bumble our way through it, so to speak.
Well, I think one of the key things is not to, as you said, bumble along. Don't rush in. Consult the local community. Within every school's sort of radius of influence, if you like, you have a really wide range of people from many Aboriginal communities. You know, one thing we can say for sure is that Aboriginal people move around a lot, live in lots of different places, so we don't always live on our own countries, as we call them. We move around, we live in different places, but there are always people from the local country. We talk about the place you're on as being your country, your territory, your place. So for me, it's the Snowy Mountains of southeastern Australia. If you're going to teach about Ngurrugu and Ngurrugu country, the Snowy Mountains, consult the local Ngurrugu community or consult the community in general. There are always organisations. In our case, we have Ngurrugu Nation Indigenous Corporation, and over at Tumbarumba, the Toombarumba Corporation, local land councils like down at Tumut Brungle Land Council. So there are many, many places that schools can go to get local input, and that's the place to start. Ask the local Aboriginal community what they think should be brought into our school system, and then fit that into what is now a very, I think, Indigenous friendly, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander friendly curriculum.
Fantastic.
That is so inspiring.
Yeah, Professor Jacqueline Troy, thank you so much for joining us on today's program to unpack this a little further, and I feel a little bit more inspired about it perhaps than when we started the program, and I was a bit more unsure, but thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. Greg, another great guest, another great episode. Do you have any top tips and ideas for today's episode?
Well, I do, and I really want to listen to the experts, Jacqueline, but I've summarised them like this for our Ticker Ed top tips. So firstly, celebrate, not just recognise Indigenous cultures at all opportunities. Try to incorporate meaningful Indigenous knowledges within the curriculum, and make sure you, as a board, as a leadership team, adopt goals to actually create change within your school strategic plan. And if you do that, the rest will start falling into action. So another great program, really proud of this one, Mike, long overdue.
Absolutely.
And absolutely one that I hope will get a lot of traction in our world.
I think I'm going to think about how language and talking about encoding culture. I thought that was really interesting from her. Some really clever stuff.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Greg, thanks to you as always. Guys, what a great show today, presented by Inquiry Tracker, of course. And if you'd like to learn more about how your school can use this amazing admissions software, please head to inquirytracker.net. I'm your host, Mike Loader. Thanks for joining me on the program, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Be well.